Our speaker today is Trevor Loudon. He is from Christchurch, New Zealand. He has studied communism over the past 30 years and in the process has interviewed Western intelligence officers, government undercover operatives, and former KGB officers. This research has provided him with insight of how minuscule communist parties take over countries by influence and policy. His research shows that we have a threat to our national security and even the survival of our nation from such a movement. Mr. Loudon was responsible for uncovering the ties that our president had to the Communist Party member Frank Marshall Davis and to New York and Chicago Marxist movements. He also uncovered Green Czar Van Jones' communist connections, and Van Jones was eventually forced to resign from his White House positions. Since 2011, Mr. Loudon has toured the United States promoting his two books, Barack Obama and the Enemies Within, and the Enemies Within, Communists, Socialists, and Progressives in the U.S. Congress. And it is an extensively footnoted expose of the rapidly unfolding Marxist movement in the U.S. He believes that if America should fail, so will every Western nation, including his beloved New Zealand. And one thing I've noted about Trevor Loudon is that he loves America as much as us natural-born people. Mr. Loudon has addressed more than 300 groups in more than 30 states, and we're glad that he came here today to address ours. Mr. Trevor Loudon.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thanks for the great introduction. Can everybody hear me okay? Can you understand a real southern accent? Look, thanks very much for coming today. I know there's a lot of things to do on a Sunday afternoon, but being amongst like-minded souls, when so many important things are happening in this country, I think is a great way to spend your time. Now, Reagan always said you should start with a funny story. And I had one recently. I was in Los Angeles. I went to a street vendor. I bought some food. And the guy said to me, "Look, you've got an accent." I said, "Yeah, I'm from New Zealand." He said, "Well, where's that?" And I said, "Well, it's actually down by Australia." He said, "Oh, where Arnold Schwarzenegger comes from." That's Common Core geography for you. So, look, everybody always says to me, why do I care about the United States? And I say there are two basic reasons. The first is simple gratitude. My country was saved in World War II by the massive sacrifice of your fathers and uncles and grandfathers at the battles of Guadalcanal and the Coral Sea and Midway. Without that sacrifice, we would have been done. And that's a very strong memory in my country today. The second reason is related, but it's a little more selfish. Ronald Reagan had it right. This is the last best hope for mankind. Amen. If freedom should fail in the United States, if you lose your constitution, your liberty, your economic dynamism, and your military superiority, all of which are in grave danger, the bad guys of this planet, Russia, China, Iran, Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, North Korea, and their Islamic allies, and they are allies, they will carve up this globe amongst themselves. We see this happening right now, folks. We see Mr. Putin advancing on the Ukraine. Your allies all around this planet, people, are freaking out because they see that your president loves the bad guys more than he loves them. And they're looking at your country and thinking, is it worth being an ally of America? They saw what Mr. Obama did to Poland and Czechoslovakia. One of his first acts of office was to cancel the missile shield that was going to protect them from the Russians. Then they saw him abandon Georgia to the Russians. Then they saw him abandon the Iranians and the Green Revolution to the mullahs. Did nothing to help them. Then they saw him basically betray your ally in Egypt, Mr. Mubarak, for a Muslim Brotherhood government. And when that was kicked out, he's now trying to overturn it back again. And now they're looking at the Ukraine, folks. The Ukraine has a treaty signed in your Senate under Bill Clinton, guaranteeing them American military protection in the event of Russian military aggression. They gave up their nuclear arsenal in exchange for an American promise. And now that they need it, folks, where is it? So far, Obama has sent a few $100 million of non-lethal aid. He gave $2 billion to India recently for smart cities, Agenda 21. Yet he is considering helping the Ukrainians. A treaty doesn't mean considering, folks. A treaty is binding, in my opinion. But he's considering giving them some aid, and he sent them John Kerry. Who is John Kerry? Yeah, you can keep him. Who is John Kerry, folks? He's basically Jane Fonda with less testosterone. But to be fair, Mr. Obama has put some sanctions on the Russians. I saw a rally in downtown Moscow not long ago that really summed up what they think of those sanctions. A woman held up a sign, a pro-Putin rally, a woman held up a sign. It said, "Your porn is harder than your sanctions." So you have a situation, folks. The Russians are clearly intent on re-establishing their empire. If they can take the Ukraine, they'll get the Baltic states, they'll get Eastern Europe. Greece has just gone under a communist government and they're already reaching out to the Russians. If you don't face them now, people, you'll be facing them down the track and they'll be a lot stronger. Iran is clearly intent on dominating the Middle East, obliterating Israel. You've got ISIS going crazy, committing all sorts of atrocities, murdering hundreds of thousands of Christians. And just as a little aside, folks, 20 million Christians did not vote in the last election who could have. And they are wondering why their co-religionists are being slaughtered in the Middle East. Had they changed the government in this country, would their fellow Christians been dying today? Maybe not. You've got China building a big blue water navy in the Pacific, threatening Japan, threatening the Philippines. They control much of Latin America, much of Africa. Your enemies are on the march, folks. Because this is a serious situation. This is not about a depression. You Americans can fight your way out of a depression. This is not even about losing your rights, because you're Americans and you'll stand up and take them back. But have you ever been in a position before when your commander-in-chief is spitting at your enemies, spitting at your allies, empowering your enemies, and gutting your military? Since Obama has been in power, he has cancelled all sorts of weapon systems. He's purged senior officers he doesn't like. He's driving thousands more out of the military with the gay policies, women in combat, rock bottom morale. He wants to cut your Navy back to pre-World War II levels, diminish the size of your army. He wants to cut your nuclear arsenal to 265 nukes and then down to 0, when the Russians alone have more than 8,500 that we know about. But they would never use them against you, would they? because Hillary Clinton's made them your friend, right? People, this is serious, folks, because your enemies are getting stronger, your allies are backing away from you, and your military is getting weaker. What is the inevitable result of abandoning Reagan's doctrine of peace? Would Iran be doing what it's doing? Would China be doing what it's doing? We're dying right now because this country has twice elected an anti-American president. And the reality is, people, if you go down, every Western country will fall. There ain't nowhere to run, because if there was, I would be there now. You've got to remember, I think, that Obama was mentored by pro-Soviet Marxists his entire life. Frank Marshall Davis in Hawaii, almost certainly a Soviet agent. Alice Palmer in Chicago, the woman who got him his first job in politics, definitely a Soviet agent. Their agenda was always to destroy the United States military, because they knew if they could take out your military, their friends in Russia and China would rule this planet. If Obama was just stupid, folks, would he not make the odd move in your favour by mistake? If Obama was a fully paid up Russian agent here to gut your military and destroy your national sovereignty, what would he be doing differently than he is today, people? I think the most significant thing that Obama said in his entire first term of office, he was caught off mic in South Korea, thought no one was listening, talking to then Russian President Dmitry Medvedev. Yes, Mr. Medvedev, when I get re-elected, I'll have more flexibility to deal with you. Yes, said Medvedev, I understand. I will pass your message on to Vladimir. We are with you. What more of a warning do you need, guys? Now, my books, I've only got one here today. My Obama one sold out. My books, and it's pretty heavy. I'm not lugging it around anymore. My books are basically about the two big secrets of modern communism. The first secret, I think they borrowed from the devil, because we all know that the cleverest thing the devil ever did was to convince people he doesn't exist. And what have the communists been telling you in the last 20 years, folks? Pretty much the same thing, right? Well, you can trust them about as much as you can trust the devil, folks. The second big secret of modern communism, which is hardly ever discussed in the thousands of books on the subject, it is the ability of a tiny Marxist-Leninist party, maybe only a few hundred comrades strong, to influence and even control the legislative process in their country. In other words, to write the laws. What I'm saying is less than 20,000 card-carrying communists in this country are right now writing the laws that rule the lives of more than 300 million Americans. A little bit far-fetched, isn't it? Now, the mechanism they use is control of the labour unions. Now, you were very lucky in this country for a long time because your AFL-CIO was run by hardcore anti-communists like Lane Kirkland and George Meany. They kept the Reds out of the unions, folks. But in 1995, everything changed. A massive political change in your politics, and I bet you never heard a word about it. That was the year that Democratic Socialists of America, your largest Marxist group, Gramsciist communists, that was the year, in conjunction with the Communist Party USA, they took over the AFL-CIO. They kicked out Lane Kirkland and they put DSA member John Sweeney in as president. And now their protege Richard Trumka runs it for them. The first thing they did was to abolish the anti-communist clause from the AFL-CIO's constitution, and the Marxists came flooding back. Now they control every single major labour union you have. SEIU, AFSCME, NEA, the AFL-CIO, you name it, folks, they run it. Now you might say, well, big deal, like, unions are 11, 12% of the workforce. This is a right to work state. Why should we worry? But you tell me this. You name me one elected Democrat in this country from county commission to federal level who does not owe his job to the unions. For money, for manpower, get out the vote, even for vote fraud, which thankfully isn't a problem in your state. This part is not, no. Allen West territory. But so look, the process is very simple. The Marxists set a policy. This is what we want for America. It might be socialisation of student loans, green jobs, cap and trade, card check, normalisation of relations with Cuba, which they've just gotten. It might be a New START treaty with Russia. It might be Obamacare. All communist policies. The communists make these policies union policies, and the unions make them Democrat policies. There's not a policy in today's Democratic Party that cannot be traced directly back to the Communist Party USA or Democratic Socialists of America, or both. They're completely setting the agenda, folks. Once they took over the unions, the communists basically purged the Democratic Party. They got rid of all the moderates, all the centrists, all the Dixiecrats. Joe Lieberman, the senator from Connecticut, was the last one to go. Now they own that party, folks. Lock, stock and barrel. And it's a very sad thing that at a local level you've got a lot of good, loyal Democrats who believe in their country and love their constitution, and they still think they're voting for Harry Truman and JFK. They have no idea what's happened to their party. Now I want to give an example of how this process works. And I'll pick an example that's been very much in the news. It's divided the country to a degree and divided the Republican Party to a degree. Comprehensive immigration reform, otherwise known as amnesty. Now you have Republicans, people, that tell you that amnesty will be good for the GOP. Because if you give 11 or 12 or 20 million illegals, no one knows how many there are, if you give them citizenship and voting rights, they're all going to be so grateful they'll all become staunch Republicans, right? It's just delusional. We know that the bulk of the Latinos, who are the bulk of the illegals, are socially conservative, but they vote overwhelmingly Democrat. Maybe they will change in 10, 20, 30 years, but we don't have that time, folks. We have one election cycle to save this country, because if we lose it, the Democrats are never going to let go of power again, ever. This is not the old game, folks. This is a Marxist takeover that they are engaged in. So, why do some Republicans tell you this stuff? Could it be connected in any way to the fact that the US Chamber of Commerce has spent more than $1.7 billion promoting amnesty in the last 10 years? What do you think the Chamber wants out of it, guys? Cheap labour. So the Chamber wants profits, and I'm all for profits. I'm all for business, 100%. But when you make a profit, you have to factor in the hidden costs, and the person making the profits should be paying those costs. So the hidden cost of amnesty is the destruction of your border integrity, the destruction of your national security, and the lessening of the rule of law in your land. So the Chamber and their people are making the profits, but guess who is taking the costs? You guys, folks. Is that fair? But the real driver of this is the hard left, the communist movement. This started out in California in the 1950s. Any Californians here today? Must be one or two. Okay. This started out in California in the 1950s with a Communist Party member named Bert Corona, hardcore Stalinist. He was also a Democrat. He set up the Viva Kennedy clubs, the first organised effort to bring Latinos into the Democratic Party. He also set up a big network through the Southwest and Southern California of support groups for illegals. The purpose of these groups was to encourage illegals across the border, get them work in factories and farms, get them citizenship and voting. The voting was the goal, folks. Now, Mr. Corona trained a whole bunch of disciples to carry on his work. 3 of them are very well known in Southern California today. They work closely together and they have transformed that state. The first one is Antonio Villagrosa, until recently the mayor of Los Angeles. Hardcore Marxist-Leninist, he used to go down to Cuba to cut sugarcane for the Castro brothers. He turned LA into a sanctuary city. He forbade the LAPD from enforcing immigration laws, and the illegals flooded in the hundreds of thousands. Changed the entire demographics of the state. Second member of this group, Gil Cedillo, a Communist Party supporter until recently the Democratic head of the California State Senate. Big-time amnesty activist. He got the DREAM Act pushed through in California about 3 years ago, which gave all sorts of so-called rights to the children of what they call undocumented workers. Third member of this group, a hardcore Marxist, the most powerful woman in California in my opinion, Maria Elena Durazo, the head of the California AFL-CIO. She is behind the massive union-driven and union-paid-for Latino voter registration drives and get-out-the-vote efforts that have added hundreds of thousands of new Latino voters to the California rolls in the last 15 years. Almost all of them Democrats. The result of this deliberate Marxist program has been to turn California from a reddish-purplish state to solidly blue. All of California's electoral college votes, so critical in any presidential election, now belong to the Democrats. Totally. Now, the leader of this movement today is a man called Eliseo Medina. I guarantee you've seen him on TV wearing a purple shirt leading an amnesty rally. He was until recently the executive vice president of the SEIU union. He's a card-carrying member of Democratic Socialists of America. He supports the Communist Party USA, and he is a former member of Obama's Latino Advisory Committee alongside several other Marxists. He also works very closely with Luis Gutierrez, the Democratic rep from Illinois, who is trying to get amnesty through the House. Gutierrez is a former member of the Puerto Rican Socialist Party, a pro-Cuban Marxist-Leninist outfit. Medina is the man who got the amnesty bill pushed through your Senate a couple of years ago. When he failed to get it through the House, he went straight to Obama and basically urged him to do executive amnesty. He visits the White House on a regular basis. Now, I want to ask a little question. I don't know about this room. I'm not after victims here, but anybody in this room a former or current union member? One or two? Couple? Okay. Well, here's a question. Which organisation in the United States 25 years ago was leading the charge against illegals, against illegal immigration? The unions, the AFL-CIO. They had people on the border, folks. They were constantly lobbying Congress to increase penalties on any employer caught employing illegals, because they saw quite correctly that illegals were unfair competition for union members and would drive wages and conditions down and cost jobs. So in 2015, which organisation is leading the charge to legalise the illegals? Unions, same people. So why were illegals bad for union workers 25 years ago, but now they're okay? Well, the answer is very simple. Before not, yeah, exactly. But who's in charge? Before 1995, the unions were there to represent the interests of their members. Since 1995, when they were taken over by Democratic Socialists of America and the Communist Party, their agenda changed to promoting socialist revolution. The illegals are real bad for union workers, folks, but the unions are taking their members' money every day and selling their jobs down the river because the revolution comes first. And it is not easy to get union members to vote directly against their own interests. It took Eliseo Medina 5 years of hardcore lobbying, deal-making and arm-twisting inside the AFL-CIO to get them to flip their policy from anti-illegal to pro-illegal, which he achieved at their national convention in Louisiana in 2000. The Marxists did it, folks. But the big question is this: why does he want it? Why is he pushing for this full time, and why has Obama risked so much political capital on a hugely unpopular move? Medina let the cat out of the bag at a big progressive conference in Washington, D.C. 3 years ago. Got up in front of the comrades and said this: passing an immigration bill is the #1 priority of the progressive movement. He said this: we have to get citizenship and voting rights for our 11 million undocumented workers. And did he talk about compassion or reuniting families or giving immigrants a break or the American dream? Not a single word, folks. All he said was this: in 2008, Latinos voted overwhelmingly for Obama and progressive candidates. If we stand by these people and get them citizenship and voting rights, they will stand with our movement. That will give us at least 8 million more Democratic Party votes. That will give us a governing majority, not just for the next few election cycles, but for the foreseeable future. How many votes did Mitt Romney lose by last time, guys? 2.5 million, was it? 2.5 million votes. 8 million more Democratic Party votes, people. The first thing that will happen is that Texas will go blue. And if you take the Electoral College votes from Texas, your second most populous state, add them to the Electoral College votes of California, your most populous state, do the math, people. It is virtually impossible from that point on for the Republicans to ever elect another president. Ever. One-party state, folks. And if you think the Democrats are arrogant now, what do you think they'll be like with 8 million more votes in their pockets and the GOP permanently out of office? Would it just be the IRS they send after their enemies? Would this country become like France or Germany, as some naive conservatives will try and tell you? Or would it become like Venezuela pretty quickly and Cuba not long after? Because that is the plan, folks. That is why they are doing this. And you have Republicans, folks, telling you this is good for the GOP. I'm going to be harsh here, people. These are not stupid people telling you this. They can add up numbers. I bet you they know exactly the total of the checks they got from the Chamber of Commerce. Yet they want to give the Democrats 8 million free votes with no plan to counter it. What do you call people who sell out their own country for a pile of cash, folks? I'm being harsh, people, because they deserve it. That's the reality. Whether it's naivety or complicity, they are selling you out if they push amnesty. Now, the other thing my book is about is the individuals, because I think these people should be held accountable for what they're doing to your country, folks. Now, I want to ask another question. Anybody in this room ever applied for a federal government job, not counting military, who is willing to admit it? All good private sector people here. Most of you are military, I suppose. Well, I know that if you apply for a federal government job, even post office, you have to have an FBI security clearance. And they can go through your underwear drawers, folks. They check out your family background, overseas travel, drug habits, criminal convictions, education, associates. I had a friend who applied for a federal government job in Virginia 2 years ago. And this guy is a staunch conservative. The FBI drove to Canada to interview his communist uncle. On the strength of that interview, my friend was denied that job. And I support that, folks, because this is the US federal government we're talking about. This is the heart of the free world. This country has enemies who will use your weak and dishonest against you. You might be in charge of public policy someday. You might be guarding the president or a nuclear facility. They need to be able to trust you. But what if you're a young Marxist radical who hangs around with the Communist Party like Corinne Brown or Elsie Hastings or Jan Schakowsky or Barbara Lee or John Conyers or Eddie Bernice Johnson, Sheila Jackson Lee, Rosa DeLauro, and they control the local unions and the local Democratic Party, and they can put a nice suit and tie on you, and they can get you elected to Congress or even the Senate, where you can serve on the Armed Services Committee, the Science and Technology Committee, the Judiciary Committee, Homeland Security Committee, even the Intelligence Committee, where you have access to all sorts of government secrets at the highest levels and the ability to influence public policy, not just on a national level, but an international level. How much of an FBI security check does that one take, folks? Nothing. Because the people are supposed to vet the candidates, right? And the media is supposed to help you do it, right? Sure. How's that working out, guys? Not at all. If the media's on the wrong side, you're in trouble, folks. So if you were a foreign intelligence officer up in the United Nations, which has hundreds of them, someone from Cuba or Nicaragua, Venezuela, North Korea, Iran, Russia, China, South Africa, and you have networks in this country of your sympathizers in the communist groups and labour movement of this nation, and they all do, and some of those groups had the ability to elect their secret members and sympathizers into your Congress, where they could get any information they wanted and influence public policy in directions favourable to your enemies. Do you think those foreign intelligence officers are so stupid and lazy they do not exploit that opportunity? Massive hole in your national security, folks. The most important legislators in the free world have all sorts of information, all sorts of power, and zero security checks. People, if you're an Iranian intelligence officer in this country and you don't do your job, you might not go home to a fat pension. You might go home to the gulag or a firing squad. Do you seriously think they do not exploit this massive hole in your national security? I quote in my book Raul Castro boasting how members of your Congressional Black Caucus, which was set up by communists, go down to Cuba on a regular basis to talk to him about how they're going to work inside your Congress to change your foreign policy to ease trade and travel restrictions on Cuba, which now they've done. So basically now the Cubans can send even more spies and more terrorists and more drugs into your country. What do you call it when someone goes from your country to an enemy foreign country to help them against you? Is that a bad thing, folks? It's a capital offence. But it's happening every day, people. And it's been going on for a while too. How many Vietnam veterans in the room today? I knew there'd be several. Well, thanks very much, gentlemen. That's the first thing I'll say. Well, here's a question for you. Was the Vietnam War lost in the jungles of Vietnam? Always get the same answer. Well, here's another question. Is it true that your troops had a whole bunch of rules of engagement, like they couldn't chase the enemy to certain places, couldn't bomb certain harbours, couldn't mine harbours, couldn't occupy territory, had to retreat and let the enemy re-infiltrate? Is any of that true? All true. Here's a really stupid question. Did those rules hamper your ability to win that war? Okay. So had you been allowed to fight that war like you were in World War II, to take the fight to the heart of the enemy, do you think you could have won it and won it pretty quickly? Okay, 6 months. Okay, so this country lost 58,000 men in that war, let alone the hundreds of thousands of wounded and psychologically damaged. Think of all the millions of Vietnamese who suffered imprisonment, torture, execution. 58,000 of your brothers, cousins, uncles, classmates, fellow servicemen. People, and then when you withdrew, your government defunded the South Vietnamese military and guaranteed a communist victory. It is my contention, quite straight, that you had people in your Congress who were deliberately trying to sabotage that war effort. Many of them, like Father Drinan from Massachusetts, were working hand in glove with the Communist Party USA, which was taking its orders directly from the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, which was allied to the Communist Party of North Vietnam. Do you think there might have been a little bit of treason going on there, folks? And how many of those congressmen who sold your brothers down the river, cost thousands of unnecessary lives, how many of them paid a single penalty for what they did, folks? One of them is now Secretary of State. And John Conyers is still in Congress, people. How long's he been there now? 140, 160 years? People, John Conyers headed the Judiciary Committee, still serves on it. One of the most powerful bodies in your Congress, the body that writes federal legislation. It is also the body that oversees the Federal Bureau of Investigation and grants its budget. John Conyers has a 50-year history with the Communist Party USA. He's got a 40-year history with Democratic Socialists of America, has been a card-carrying member of it while serving in your Congress. He's got a 20-year history with the Workers' World Party, which supports North Korea and Cuba and Iran. John Conyers is a hardcore anti-American Marxist-Leninist, as hardcore as you can get, folks. Yet he oversaw the budget of the FBI. What do you think would happen to the FBI's budget if they ever came after John Conyers or his communist friends in your Congress, folks? Can you see the problem there? Charlie Rangel, Ways and Means Committee, the body that writes those wonderful federal tax laws that help your businesses prosper and make you all rich. Doesn't obey them, but he writes them. Charlie Rangel has a 50-year history with the communist movement, member of 2 Soviet fronts that I know about, and invited Fidel Castro to Harlem in 1995 for a little get-together. Pictures in my book of them smiling. Do you think Charlie Rangel is ever going to support real tax reform for you people? What about Rosa DeLauro, one of your top Democrats? Right up there with Nancy Pelosi. I've got pictures in my book of her in the headquarters of the Connecticut Communist Party hugging her best friend, Joel Fishman, the head of the Connecticut Communist Party. The communist delegated by the party with liaising with the Democrats to elect as many left-wingers as possible into your Congress. And what about Tammy Baldwin, senator from Wisconsin, long-time member of the Columbian Support Network? That group, which is full of communists, including the famous Bernardine Dawn, supports Colombia's Marxist-Leninist FARC guerrillas, known as narco-terrorists, because they fund their revolution by selling cocaine into your country via Cuba, which will now be easier. Tammy Baldwin has used her position in your Congress on many occasions to try and get US military aid cut off to the Colombian government so they can do to that country what they did to South Vietnam. If she ever succeeds and they take over, they will send even more cocaine into your country. And what about Judy Chu out of California? Looks like butter wouldn't melt in her mouth, one of your top Democrat congresswomen, head of the Progressive Caucus, head of the Asia Pacific Caucus in your Congress, on Obama's re-election committee, goes to China all the time to build business ties between China and California. When she's in China, she tells the press, "I'm coming home." The Chinese press describes her as China's representative in your Congress. Greensboro, North Carolina, folks, 1979. Pro-Maoist, pro-Chinese, nutcase Communist Workers' Party got in a street gun battle with the Ku Klux Klan. Automatic weapons were used in broad daylight, folks, and 5 people died. The Greensboro Massacre. You look it up. Judy Chu used to head one of the Communist Workers' Party's main front groups for years. She still works with at least 5 former leaders of the Communist Workers' Party right now. One of them helped her to set up the Asia Pacific Caucus in your Congress. Basically, China's voice in your Congress. You have got at least 100 members of your House and 20 members of your Senate who would not pass a basic FBI security clearance to clean the toilets at any military base in your country. And neither would your president. Think that could be a problem? But I don't want to depress you people with that or bring you down in any way. I'm a little late. Sorry about that, guys. Look, if I thought there was no hope for America, I'd be back in my beautiful New Zealand right now, building bunkers and stocking up on baked beans. And I'm not mocking prepping, believe me. But this is how I see it, folks. 2008... the left thought they had a slam dunk. They had the House, they had the Senate, and they had their man in the White House. And their agenda was written out, folks. They were going to take you down. All those 60s radicals, those Bill Ayerses and Bernardine Dawns, who'd been burrowing through your unions, through your media, through the Democratic Party for 40 years, finally their hour had come. They were going to take you down, people. But in 2009 and 2010, something miraculous happened. And I do not use that word lightly. Some of you might have been involved in this. What am I talking about, folks? The Tea Parties. They came out of nowhere, people. A bunch of amateurs and novices stood up and they blogged and they marched and they emailed and they rallied and they agitated. And together with Glenn Beck and the conservative grassroots of the GOP, they took back the House in 2010. And that brought the agenda of the left to a grinding, screeching halt. People, in 2008, Obama could walk on water. Yet 2 years later, thanks to that grassroots agitation, he lost the House in a landslide. People, they had it in the bag. They were breaking out the vodka. Who was going to stop them? John Boehner? And a bunch of amateurs and novices came out of nowhere and took their toys away. And some people in the Tea Party wonder why they get called dirty names. I'm going to say this straight, folks. I say that the Tea Party saved America. Because had they not done what they did to strengthen the GOP in that time, the entire agenda of the left would be in now. They would have got card check, cap and trade, green jobs, Obamacare locked in the first year. Then they would have got amnesty through. You would have had all the illegals voting in 2012 and 2014. Where would you be then, guys? Up the creek, on your way to New Zealand. Seriously, people, it was that critical. If you guys hadn't stopped them in 2010 and again in 2014, where would you be now? Now, I want to do something now that's normally considered very bad manners, right? But I'm a Kiwi and I can go home. Okay? Now, you don't go to someone else's country and tell them how to run things, do you? It's just not kosher. But I get asked all the time. I've spoken to there's actually over 400 groups in 43 of the 57 states now. See if you're awake. And I get asked all the time, what do we do? Because I see this friction between the Tea Party and the GOP. I see, do we work together? Do we form a third party? Do we just do local issues? Are we wasting our time? I get asked these questions all the time. Now, this is my view, and I may offend one or two people here, but I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to try and help save your country because I care about it. Because if your country goes down, mine's next. So sometimes you have to say things as they are. Now, I see you have 100 years of progressivism to unroll. That might take you 10, 20, 30 years, I don't know. But one thing I do know is that you have to win 2016. Yes. You have to. Because if you don't, the Democrats are going to dissolve the southern border and they're going to import as many illegal Democrats as they need to keep you permanently out of office. We ain't got 20 years, folks. We ain't got 10 years. So in the time that we have, a third party is pretty risky, right? You do what Ross Perot did, It's got to be the GOP, but the real character is this. The real question is this. What will the character of that GOP be? Because I'm going to tell you straight, people, if the Republican old guard has its way, and they give you someone like Jeb, Common Core is wonderful, illegal immigration is an act of love, Bush, your base is going to fracture. And I'll tell you straight, the Tea Party is going to break away and form a third party, and you will either have Hillary Clinton or Pocahontas Warren as your next president, folks. That is the harsh reality. The Tea Party, the Grassroots, is in a state of rebellion right now. One more insult and they're out of here. And if you think you can win the next election without the Tea Party and the Grassroots, good for you. But I'm not optimistic. They're going to run probably Elizabeth Warren with Julian Castro as his VP. Seriously. And that's going to be a pretty powerful ticket. So I want to go back. But if you have someone different, and I'm going to put a name out here now, if you have someone different, someone leading your standard, someone with a real history of bucking the establishment and putting up his fists for the Constitution, maybe someone of the caliber of Ted Cruz, for instance, things could be very different. But how do you get there? I want to go back in history now because I think this is illustrative of where you are now. Back in 1976, this country had been losing its liberties, Republican, Democrat for decades. And the people were pretty darn disgusted. But they had no options. But that year, a man came out of California with a very different vision. He spoke of a shining city on the hill, peace through security, liberty and the Constitution. And thousands of people loved Ronald Reagan's message. Loved it. And a whole bunch of grassroots people got into the GOP and they thought, we're going to get Reagan in there and the GOP will love it. And we'll all sing Kumbaya and we'll change this country. And what did the Rockefeller Republicans do about Ronald Reagan, folks? They hated him. They stabbed him in the back. Ronald Reagan was far too extreme to be elected. Ronald Reagan would be the death of the GOP. Ronald Reagan was banned from Ohio that year by the Ohio State GOP, folks. And they just beat him. They gave the nomination to Gerald Ford. Ford went up against Carter, and Carter won. How did the Carter years work out, guys? Barrel of laughs, you know, interest rates up to here, gas queues round the corner, gave away the Panama Canal, Iranian hostage crisis, gutted your military. How bad were things in the Carter years, folks? Well, a lot of people thought America would never be great again. But the really important point is this. The grassroots, they stuck with it. They stayed in the GOP. They got into precinct positions, the township committees, the nominating bodies. And when Reagan ran against in 1980, this time they were not going to take no for an answer. This time they forced the Rockefeller Republicans to give them their candidate. And they got it. And Reagan went against Carter and took him out 48 states to 2. Not bad for an unelectable candidate, right? People, the hostages were back on the first day. The interest rates went down. The taxes went down. The economy boomed. He rebuilt your military. He rebuilt the pride in this country, and he took out the Soviets without firing a shot, folks. Any better president in the 20th century? Anyone even close? And why did you have a Reagan revolution? Because people just like you, the grassroots, stuck it to the Karl Roves and the John Boehners of the day, and you decided the candidate. Because right now, people, this country is Jimmy Carter on steroids. And you need Ronald Reagan on meth to turn this around, guys. Not just to go where Reagan did, you've got to actually gut your federal government and restore your constitution. That's right. But how do you do it? Reagan was a genius. He could unite the social conservatives, the fiscal conservatives, the defence conservatives, drag those Reagan Democrats across. The great communicator. But right now, people, your base is very fractured. You've got 1 million libertarians who gave their vote to Gary Johnson last time. You've got social conservatives, fiscal conservatives. You've got Tea Party Republicans, moderate Republicans. You've got 4 million GOPers who didn't even vote last time. And you've got at least 20 million, maybe 30 million evangelical Christians who are not even registered. What could they do to transform this country, folks? Now, you may not have heard, but some of these groups don't like each other very much. Right? Have you heard about that? Yeah. Okay. We are 2 years out from the most critical election, not just in American history, but world history. Can we afford this silly bickering? All the vote fraud out there, all the media against you. Can we afford anything but unity? So this is what I would do if I was a man like Ted Cruz. Doesn't have to be him. Could be Scott Walker or someone else, but I think he's I think he's well placed to do this. I'd do this. I'd go to all of these groups and say something like this. We need to build the Reagan coalition. We've got one chance. The only way we're going to do this is if I give you something, if you have some incentive to unify. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to announce early. And I'm going to run as a team. I'm going to name my cabinet. The first thing I'm going to do is name Alan West in my VP spot right now. And then it's going to be Rand Paul, Secretary of the Treasury, and he can do what he damn well wants to the Federal Reserve and the IRS, carte blanche. And then it's going to be Sarah Palin, Secretary of Energy, and it's going to be drill, baby, drill. Drill in your backyard if you want to. Then it's going to be Scott Walker, Secretary of Labour. Right to work in every state, folks. Stick it to those unions. And then it's going to be Mike Lee, Secretary of the Interior, and he's going to take all those federal lands that they stole off the states and return them to their rightful owners. And then it's going to be Michelle Bachmann, Secretary of Commerce, and she's going to go after the EPA and OSHA, and she's going to deregulate, 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 so American businesses can work and produce again. Then it's going to be Dr. Ben Carson, Secretary of Health and Human Services. And he's going to end the welfare culture in your country, and he's going to restore dignity to your communities. And then it's going to be John Bolton, Secretary of State. And he's going to give the finger to your enemies, people, and rebuild the Western Alliance. And then very important, Ambassador to the United Nations. No one. Ever. And then it's going to be Trey Gowdy, Attorney General. And he's going to go after those vote fraudsters, folks, and prosecute and jail them. And then for all those millions of Christians who don't care about politics, but they do care about education, I would say to them, vote for me and your millions. We'll get rid of Common Core. We'll protect homeschooling. We'll make David Barton Secretary of Education. Now imagine it, folks. Name your whole cabinet and run as a team. Would you be inspired by a team like that?
Yes, absolutely.
And would it unify the base? Because every element of your base is getting something, right?
That's right.
Everyone's got someone to inspire them. Because right now, every year, you put up a candidate, every 4 years, you put up a candidate, and the liberal media rips them to pieces. But what would the media do if Ted Cruz was running with a team of 20 Rottweilers who are all backing each other up and not taking any crap from anyone? How would they handle that? There's a precedent, people. Reagan named his cabinet in '76, but there's an even better precedent. You didn't just have a founding father, guys. You had founding fathers. You had George Washington and Samuel Adams and Benjamin Franklin, Patrick Henry, James Madison, Thomas Jefferson. They ran that revolution as a team. And they had their egos, they had their conflicting agendas, but they put them aside for the sake of the country and the good of the revolution. And look what they gave you. So what I'm asking from you people is 2 more years of the hardest political work you have ever done. I know what this cost you. I know the time away from your families and your friends and your pursuits, the money it cost you, the effort it cost you, hard, thankless work. And I'm asking for 2 more years of it, folks, because 2 years is going to decide the fate of not just this country, but my country. Not just your children, but my children. I can't promise you very much, but I can promise you 2 things. If you do nothing, your children will live in slavery. But if you give it everything you've got for the next 2 years and beyond, every ounce of your ability, the very least you will earn is the right to look your children in the eye and say, I did everything I could.
Yes.
What is that worth to you people? And if you win, and you can win, you will give your children not just the amazing country you inherited, but one even greater. Is anything more worth fighting for than that? So I want to say to you folk, thank you so much for what you do for America, for my country, for liberty. God bless the GOP. God bless the Tea Party. God bless you all. Thank you.